Good morning. Thank you. Thank you. It is a joy to be with you this morning. I've been a little bit incapacitated because of a surgery and a little repair work that's been done, and I haven't been to all the events I wanted to attend, but I didn't make many after parties. Did any of you make any after parties? Well, the head rapper, Terry Healy, should have been the leader of many of those after parties. Great job, Terry. A few days ago, I was asked to say a few words at the convention. It was the earliest stage, and I talked about jobs and unions. I made a point of remembering a dear friend of mine and many of you, and that was Ed Smith. Ed Smith with the laborers was a remarkable man. I never knew a single person in my life who was more dedicated to the union movement. And from the beginning, through his father and his mother, he really set the standard for excellence when it came to representing men and women in organized labor. So I want to give a little round of applause here to Ed Smith, one of the real leaders. One of my jobs out in Washington is chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Joe Biden used to be chairman of that same committee, so he understands what we're setting out to do. What we're trying to do is to transform the face of the federal judiciary. So far, 205 nominees of the Biden administration have been approved to lifetime appointments to fill those benches. And I will tell you, they'll make a difference. When you hear in the news all the bad rulings from some of these judges, you have to realize that each one of them was chosen through the same process. What we're trying to do is to make certain that we have diversity that we've never seen before. That's why Joe Biden's promise to put an African-American woman on the Supreme Court, we kept that promise. Ketanji Brown Jackson is a remarkable person. We've also filled in those vacancies 60% women, many women of color, people who are coming to the bench with an attitude of justice that hasn't been seen in this country for years. And we're going to keep that up. That is just a small part of the legacy of Joe Biden, and I was happy to be part of it. But in the course of that, I met many people, I served with many people, and at one point we had Kamala Harris as the most junior member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. I want to tell you the respect that she has won in Washington to this day. When she was on that committee, she was the very last when it came to seniority. When they do the video clips of her asking questions, I realize she's the last person at the table, and it's hours before she gets her chance to ask questions. Without fail, there was a crowd waiting for her questions. Why? Because they were always smart and tough, and she didn't back down. That's exactly the kind of qualities we need when it comes to debating Donald Trump. Somebody who understands as a prosecutor and as a politician with heart and with determination that makes a real difference. But the story I want to tell you this morning is in the news that has been reported. J.D. Vance in Wisconsin yesterday lambasted the city of Chicago, called it the third world country when it came to crime. Well, I just want to say this. First, I want to salute the law enforcement officials who've kept us safe during this convention. In 1996, when we had our last convention here in Chicago, the delegation was nice enough to let me chair. I was running for Senate for the first time, and it was a beautiful week. The weather was perfect, just like this week, and we had a great convention, and this is a great convention as well. I'll admit to you, I was holding my breath, not sure what was going to happen, because I understand what can happen with demonstrators and protesters and such. But we have had an excellent convention, and hats off to those that did all the planning to get here. But I want to say one more thing about J.D. Vance, if I might. I know this man. Understand this. In the Senate, any single senator can stop the business of the United States Senate. J.D. Vance stopped a critical element of law enforcement and justice in America single-handedly. And let me tell you what it was. It was the appointment of a U.S. attorney. There are about 80 or 90 of those U.S. attorneys nationwide. They are the captains of the ship when it comes to critical elements of fighting crime, terrorism, stopping fentanyl from coming into our neighborhoods. And what we try to do through the president is to fill those vacancies with professionals who get the job done. J.D. Vance single-handedly stopped that process of the appointment of U.S. attorneys. It's been months since Joe Biden as president has had that opportunity. And I went to the floor, which is my right, to challenge him and say, why are you doing this? And he said, because this is so political. Let me tell you, during the Trump administration, we Democrats approved every single U.S. attorney appointment by Donald Trump without a roll call vote, with a voice vote. We couldn't have cooperated better. But when it came to filling the vacancies like the Northern District of Illinois U.S. Attorney, J.D. Vance single-handedly stopped that nomination, as well as the one for Cleveland and all the others that followed. And when I challenged him on the floor and said, why are you doing this? He said, to protest your treatment of Donald Trump. Honest to goodness, he said that. And I showed a quote on a board on the floor that said from J.D. Vance, I want to grind the Department of Justice to a halt. We do not need to hear J.D. Vance preaching about law enforcement and the kind of communities we want to live in, and look at his record and see that he single-handedly stopped the appointment of a U.S. attorney in the Northern District of Illinois and in Cleveland, Ohio. That is what he has done. So when he gives us these explanations of what's going on in this city and this state, keep that in mind, and I hope the press will report it. Let me just also say this. This convention is a throwback to another era when people literally physically appeared. No Zooms, no Skypes, no emails, no text. We sit together in the Great Hall and we bind ourselves together in an effort that is clearly coming through. I don't know Tim Walz very well, but I know high school coaches, and I'll bet you all do too. He's an extraordinary leader. And last night, one of the most touching moments you might have missed, it just flashed across the screen. But he told the story about how he and his wife worked so hard to have a family, to make that personal decision and to go forward with IVF. I am blessed to have two twins that are IVF babies, if you will, and I'm proud that my daughter and son-in-law stuck with it long enough to see that happen. But when Tim Walz last night was giving the speech about building a family and the heartbreak that was part of it, they flashed to his kids. You might have taken a look at it. And there was one moment, it couldn't have lasted more than 2 seconds, when his son Gus stood up and pointed at him and said, "That's my dad." That was a great moment. Tim and Gwen Walz made the decision for their family. And for goodness sakes, that's what we all want to have the right to do. And that's at risk now in a way that I didn't think it would ever be. The state of Alabama, for a brief period, ended up banning IVF procedures. I remember the day that Tammy Duckworth called me. I was on the phone. I was on the road, rather, I think with Bill Houlihan in the car there. And we were headed from Springfield to Bloomington. And it was Tammy on a strange day. She said, "I got something to tell you." I said, "What's up?" She said, "I'm going to have a baby." I was just speechless to think what that poor woman has been through physically, the surgeries and all the things that she might even have the possibility of having a baby. Well, she did, and it was a remarkable achievement, almost a miracle. And then secondly, she said 2 years later, "I need to talk to you in your office." And she came in and she said, "I'm going to have another baby." She said it a little differently. I'm not going to quote her, but she said, "I'm going to have another baby." And I said, "You will be the first United States senator to ever give birth in the history of the United States." "Oh," she said, "that's not true." I'm sure it's not true. But it was true. She changed the rules of the Senate so she could actually bring her baby on the floor of the Senate. Bear with me for a second. Of all the things I've done in politics, finding Tammy Duckworth may be one of the best, the very best. I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll tell you how it happened. I have 2 guest tickets for State of the Union address. Each time there's a State of the Union. And I said to my staff, "Do we have anybody in mind?" And they said, "No, we don't." And I said, "Well, why don't you call out to Walter Reed Hospital and see if there's any Illinois veteran recovering out there. They came back and they said, we found one, and she'll be here this evening. The doors opened to my office, and she came wheeling in a wheelchair, full dress uniform with all the ribbons and awards that she had earned, and Brian, her great husband, pushing the wheelchair. It was about 12 weeks after she had been shot down over Iraq, and she had this big smile on her face, and I thought to myself, this is a remarkable human being. So I encouraged her to run for Congress. She won the primary, she lost the general, but she stuck with it. She served as head of Veterans Affairs, and then came back and was elected to Congress and eventually to the Senate. We are lucky in this state to have an American hero like Tammy Duckworth as the United States Senate. I'm going to wrap this up by also noting that one of our speakers down the line, and I hope it's soon, is Nikki Budzinski, who's the new congresswoman from my district in Central Illinois. Ladies and gentlemen, that's my old congressional seat. I didn't think the day would ever come when we would finally retrieve that seat, and we've done it with a quality person. Nikki is one of the very best, and what a friend of labor. I don't know that anybody can match her record on this. It's been my pride to represent this party in elections and to fight for candidates that really make a difference in the history of this country. My wife Loretta had created an organization called I Will, which has now trained 240 women to run for Democratic women to run for office. Many of them are sitting in the room like Nancy Roder, the mayor of Highland Park. I thank all of them for what they've done. I'm going to close with this. We've had fun. Now we got to roll up our sleeves and go to work. Go home and rest for 24 hours, but no longer. And once you've recovered your strength, get out and make a difference. We've got to make sure we do our job at home first, although we may not have the statewide candidates that we're usually used to. There are many good races. I know Chris Welch was here a few minutes earlier. He's got important races for the Illinois House and for the Illinois Senate. We've got to do our homework for county officials and build our party. But then we've got to reach out to our neighbors, particularly in Wisconsin. We should adopt that state, and we have in many respects, to be part of their organization to elect Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. The Illinois organization has been one of the best in history. We can show it with the people that are serving now. Now let's take that message and bring it home on November to make sure that we have someone to beat Donald Trump. That is the priority. Thank you, everybody.